Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this isn't the video I intended to put out today, but I feel like I needed to update you guys because my Corsair 450 watt VS power supply just exploded, and I fear it may have taken a whole budget system with it, but we will be getting onto that a little later on. Now the reason I wanted to bring you a video like this was because I wanted to sort of go through the steps that you can take should something similar happen to you, as well as tell you a little bit about how this happened and how you can possibly avoid it. So this VS450 power supply I actually purchased from my friend Darren. We've used it in previous budget builds with no trouble. I do recall that this itself is a replacement unit. I think the company that he bought it from sent one out, it didn't work, and so we had to get a replacement one, which then turned up looking fine. I think it's got a little bit of a dent on the back here, if you can see that. But aside from that, it worked perfectly. Now, after a couple of times in a budget build, we noticed that one of the 4-pin CPU connectors here, let me just get that, stopped working. One of these works and one of them doesn't. I can't quite remember which one. I did sort of bend one like that, so I knew that was the one that was working. But initially we thought it was a dead motherboard. It turned out not to be the case. I swapped this over and then the whole system fired up. You may remember I put together a PC a couple of days ago featuring this very power supply. We also had a GTX 750 Ti in that build, and for the money I think it was a pretty decent budget gaming system. However, turning that same system on today and replacing the 750 Ti with a slightly more powerful yet slightly older 660 Ti, which we've also used with this power supply in the past, and after about an hour or two of usage I heard a loud pop similar to someone popping a balloon this far away from your face, a little bit of smoke, and that was it. So as anyone would do, I took to the internet to try and figure out why this had happened, and I came across a few interesting things. Now some people recommended this with no problem, and others said that due to the bad capacitors it may not last all that long, and it turns out that this one certainly didn't. Now I wasn't doing anything particularly strenuous with the system. I was playing Crysis. Crysis. Crysis has killed another component. I remember ages ago Crysis killed one of my 3870 GPUs, and it turns out it's now killed a power supply as well, which, Crysis. So in this day and age, Crysis shouldn't be that demanding on even slightly older systems, and it actually runs quite well on a lot of older hardware, but it turns out that it was quite the match for this Corsair. But I do know that the VS series are definitely the weakest of the power supplies, and in my personal rig I have a CX series power supply with 550 watts of power, and I can honestly say I would recommend that all day long, and I've never had a problem. It's also pretty silent, and so was this one. But now I want to actually see if the rest of the system is still working, because of course when a power supply blows up it may take the motherboard, it may take the GPU, and it may take a whole load of other components with it. But let's see if our system is still working with another power supply, and hopefully it is. Right, so what I've done here is assemble the components that were in the PC that died onto this test bench. I've just thrown them together here, and it could be a lot neater, but it's time to check whether or not our components are still alive and kicking. Now if you have to do this yourself, I would recommend not putting the graphics card on at first if you have a power supply that is a little bit weaker, or if you have a spare one at all. The only way to really test if everything is still working is by having access to a secondary power supply, so you may have to buy one to see whether or not the rest of the components have any life left in them. Now I've hooked everything up here all at the same time because this TX 650 will provide enough power to power everything here with ease, and plenty of room to spare. So we've got the 660 Ti hooked up with the FX 4300, and of course everything will look normal, but there's only one way to see if any damage has been done, and that is of course by turning on the system. Okay, so this is the moment of truth. Everything's hooked up, and let's see if our components still hopefully work. Yes, it looks good. Things are looking good. Now we actually have no signal on the screen, which is a little worrying. Oh, there we go. it looks as though everything's firing up. Right, so we had a little bit of a scare there, but it seems that reseating the graphics card did fix that issue, which is lucky, and I am very thankful that the whole system is still working despite that power supply totally just failing. So the only way to really avoid something like this happening is purchasing an 80 plus certified power supply. I've said it before, no matter how much money you want to save, I'd always recommend going with a well rated and well reviewed power supply to avoid anything like this happening. Of course, I don't think it should have happened with this brand, and I don't want to slate Corsair in any way. This was a very good PSU until it decided to take a funny turn, and it is just a shame that it stopped working and went out in the way it did. But guys, always look out for well-reviewed power supplies, 80 plus if you can. Don't skimp on the power that's going to supply your PC, hopefully for a very long time. But aside from that, we will resume normal content tomorrow, and yeah, I'm going to go and give this thing a proper funeral. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.